Welcome to Arizona Cardinals Underground.
Pass.
The latest news and notes from the guys who cover the team.
Wait,
From Cardinals headquarters in Tempe, here's Darren Urban.
Welcome to another edition of Cardinals Underground on azcardinals.com. I'm Darren Urban alongside Odegard and Dave Pasch, voice of the Arizona Cardinals. And as we go into the pre-draft time of the year, we're going to talk a little bit about the team needs the Cardinals have. And, you know, one of the things that General Manager Steve Keim said right after free agency, right around the time of the owners' meetings, was the fact that, hey, if we have to go into the draft right now, we don't make another move to the roster until the draft, I'm pretty happy. I feel like we've addressed these needs that we needed to hit in free agency so that we have the flexibility going into the draft that we have to pick the best player available, those kinds of things. That all being said, Dave, you know, when you look at this team and you look at this roster, there are still places that you could go and say, okay, maybe we need to address this or that. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Isn't it nice, though, to be able to go into a draft and have this conversation about, hey, what pieces can they add to a team that's a playoff team, that's a championship contender when healthy, which I think we all agree the Cardinals were last year. So certainly, and you could say the same thing for New England, which won the Super Bowl, and Seattle, which has been to the last two, that there are holes. I mean, every team has something. And I think for the Cardinals, it's pretty clear to me at least that the biggest issue is, can they generate a pass rush? You know, do they have an edge rusher, a guy they can count on game in, game out to draw double teams that offenses have to game plan for? They don't have that guy right now. So the question is, are they going to get that guy through free agency? Probably not at this point. So it's going to be through the draft. And when you're picking where the Cardinals are, you're at the mercy of other teams in front of you. So you may have a guy or two targeted that you hope falls to you, and if that doesn't happen, it's on to plan B. And look, that was what happened last year with the Cardinals. They had a guy targeted in Ryan Shazier that they wanted to acquire, whether that was him falling to them or them moving up, which the Cardinals were willing to do to draft the player they wanted. When it didn't happen, they made a move. They traded down rather than reach for a Johnny Manziel. Obviously, that looks like a pretty smart move now. Or Derek Carr. They get an extra pick. They trade down. They get Dejon Buchanan, a guy who can contribute right away. So, yeah, there are holes and areas where the Cardinals need to improve, and I think number one, it's that pass rusher.
I think that's what you want to do. Is it seems like Keim doesn't always. It's not in his motion to go up and draft a guy and try to trade up too many times, but they are in a good position where they are a championship contender. If they see somebody they like, I think they're going to go after them, and you don't want to mortgage the future too much, but you see what they did with the Carson Palmer restructure and the Fitz restructure, and the time is now. So if they find somebody, they don't have a ton of needs. I agree with you, they do have some, but if there is that pass rusher, there's a group of 5 that are pretty good in that first round, and if one is hanging around at number 20 or so, and you think you need to move up a little bit to get him, I think they could do that.
It's interesting because we've had this discussion about the pass rusher for a few years now, predating Steve Keim as general manager, in fact. We keep talking about needing that, and if you talk to Steve Keim, and he'll talk about the positions that you can't get away from needing those guys, the premier positions, the quarterback, the left tackle, cornerback, and a pass rusher. If you get elite guys at those positions, that's what you're always looking for. That's what you need. And those are the premium positions that you have it difficult doing. It seems by all accounts, Dave, and you've watched a lot more college football than we have, that this draft is fairly deep in pass rushers. But we also know if all you got to do is look back last year, 2 years ago, however many years you want to go back, pick any draft, you're going to find the handful of premier pass rushers that were coming out, and some of them hit and some of them do not. So not only do you got to hope that one of these guys falls to you, but you got to hope that the one guy that does fall to you, if you get him, is going to pan out. And that's this thing that the Cardinals are always chasing at this point is getting that right guy.
And I think for that position, you know, when you're drafting a pass rusher in the first round, you're going to draft a guy who's run well, who is an athlete. Chances are when you draft a pass rusher later, unless it's because of a character issue that caused him to drop, you're getting a guy who athletically is not as talented as a guy in the first round. So you're getting a guy who's probably not a pure pass rusher, who maybe gets by on technique or is a scheme guy, like a lot of the guys that they have. So, you know, unless you get that elite guy in the first round who athletically, and there are a couple guys in this draft that are, you know, certainly rated way higher than a lot of other guys. If you pick later and you try to get a pass rusher later, you can help your team, but you're getting a guy who's Alex Okafor, Sam Acho, a guy who might be able to get you anywhere from 5 to 9 sacks, but are they a guy that's going to command that double team each game?
Well, and Kyle, that's a great point when we keep talking about getting deeper in the draft and finding these premier guys. And when you look overall, and we've obviously agreed pass rusher is up there. So I want to ask both of you, starting with Kyle. So if we're looking at what other needs there might be, what other, and we're going to say we're going to stipulate for the jury that Steve Keim is going to not take any position off the table if the right guy is there, because he's made that very clear that he'll draft a guy if he's a good player. But I think pass rusher has to be on that list. Running back has to be on that list. Cornerback probably has to be on that list. You might want to seriously think about an interior offensive lineman, another one, just to see what you do, and also somebody as an inside linebacker. We can talk about the outside linebackers, but they're still thin at inside linebacker. I mean, where would you kind of see prioritize this maybe?
Well, personally, I think, outside linebacker, obviously. And then it's interesting because when you get to that point, number 24 on the board, you can still probably get the best inside linebacker. You might be able to get the top running back or the second running back. So it's probably the best center on the board. So it's something where you might not get this impact position like you're talking about, the cornerstone positions in football, but you can get the best player from college football at another position. And what I'm interested to see is how these running backs are going to go, because there's all the talk about how a running back hasn't gone in the first round for a couple of years now, and Todd Gurley and Melvin Gordon, obviously it seems like they're going to. If one of them are on the board, do the Cardinals do that, or would they rather stay away and think, we got Andre Ellington in the 6th round, we got Kerwin Williams as an undrafted kid off the street, he had a good season, can we find enough later where we want to use it in a different spot? So to me, that's most interesting, where they have a clear need, but do they use it in the first round?
And Dave, I mean, when you look at their needs, I mean, how would you kind of prioritize them, and how do you kind of see it? Same thing?
I'm kind of with Kyle. I think a running back is further down the list. I think, first of all, we talked about it, getting an elite pass rusher, which is hard to do, but that should be priority number one.
Yeah.
Secondly, I think right tackle is still a question mark. I think the Cardinals feel comfortable with Bobby Massey, but I think if there's a chance to upgrade, and if that means drafting a tackle in the first round that can play right tackle, even though he was a left tackle in college, you can look for that position. Maybe it's, thinking about Jared Valdir. Is he a guy that if you get a first-round left tackle, do you move him to right tackle? I think they feel that he can play right tackle as well. Cornerback, when you lose Cromartie and what he meant last year, I think that's a position that, you like Gerard Powers and what he brings. Justin Bethel, he hasn't played enough to really evaluate him. And then I think also finding a wide receiver who can return. I still think they need help at that position. Look, Michael Floyd didn't have a great year. Larry Fitzgerald's getting older. Yeah. John Brown, as the year went on, looked more and more like we thought he would, a rookie. The first half of the season, he was just off the charts. So can you find a receiver who can also be a return guy? And there's a lot of guys in this draft like that.
It's funny you bring that up in terms of looking a little bit more long-term, which you always have to do. But when we get close to the draft, we tend to get very myopic. People get myopic about what are their immediate needs, and then we talk about the running back. And you start looking. You mentioned Bobby Massey. Bobby Massey's an unrestricted free agent after this season. We talk about cornerback. Justin Bethel is an unrestricted free agent after the season. Gerard Powers is an unrestricted free agent after the season. You start looking at, where they might have to go long-term, and Steve Keim is always talking about the 3-year plan and planning out 3 years. These are the kind of things that could impact a decision they might make, which not everybody is paying attention to at the time, and that's something you got to keep in mind.
I think in a perfect world, you want it where this guy can come in and make an impact next season right away. Maybe that's whether it's in a rotation or full-time basis, and then also can be there for the future. So it's an interesting thing. If you do take a tackle, then is he sitting for an entire year and you have Bobby Massey play, and then he comes in next season and you look and you have your first-round pick on the bench in a season when you just won 11 games last year. So it's like you obviously want this guy to have a big impact next season. So it's an interesting balancing act, and it's different than a team that's just rebuilding and you don't have to worry about winning this season. But for them, they have to balance both.
And to answer the whole debate about the running back, every mock draft, right, has the Cardinals picking a running back.
Yes.
Let me remind people, every mock draft last year had the Cardinals taking Derek Carr.
True.
There was never an intention to draft Derek Carr. Bruce Arians even apologized to Derek at the press conference.
Right. Yeah.
saying, hey, it's not our fault, but we felt badly that his name was thrown out there. He was never in the discussion. And I'm not saying Melvin Gordon isn't in the discussion, but I just think, look, guys, when 12 months prior, they're talking about Andre Ellington being the centerpiece of the offense. I don't think you go away from that just yet. Now, he's got to stay healthy. You've got Stephon Taylor, you've got Marion Grice, you've got Kerwin Williams. They can plug those guys in. Okay, we could take a guy here in the first round. Todd Gurley's had injuries. Melvin Gordon has had some injuries as well. Look, the shelf life of running back isn't that high. And I just don't know that you want to go away from your plan with Andre Ellington just yet. I think if you draft a guy that high, even though you're going to be platooning him, you're almost saying, yeah, last year we were wrong about how we viewed Andre Ellington.
So is that your tease? Is that your Twitter tease?
I guess so.
Pasch?
Yeah, that was my silly TV
and that makes
tease.
sense to me. Yeah. It makes sense. And again, in a lot of ways, not taking a running back in the first round kind of goes towards Steve Keim's philosophy. This is one of the issues that I had with all the trade talk out there about the Cardinals and a certain running back that we won't get too detailed into right now, but it goes against what Steve Keim is built, which is, you're being smart with your money and you're being smart. And I understand there are talents that supersede that sometimes.
Keep in mind, too, he's been burned twice on drafting a running back high. Ryan Williams in the second round, Beanie Wells in the first round. Neither guy lasted more than 4 years.
Well, let me wrap this up, this edition of Cardinals Underground on azcardinals.com with this question. And it's not as to the forefront as it's been in the past for multiple reasons, both with the draft class coming in terms of prospects and where the Cardinals sit. But let's talk quarterback. This team we've talked a million times about whether they're going to draft a quarterback, whether that would be something. Kyle, is this something that you think that they would look at with the Logan Thomas question looming out here and Drew Stanton going into his free agent year and Carson Palmer coming off an ACL? How do you see that playing out?
I think just because they took Logan Thomas last year, I don't think that precludes them from taking a quarterback if they like him, though. It doesn't seem like there's anybody going to be there at 24 unless they just shock everybody because the top two guys, Mariota and Winston, will be gone, and then there's kind of a gap for the next guys. But, people are saying Brett Hundley came in for a workout, and there's Bryce Petty, and there's the second tier of quarterbacks who will be around second, third, fourth round. And, like Steve Keim has said many times, you're going to take your franchise guy in the first round, and then you're going to look down the road to more of a project, and they did that with Logan. And if they see another guy who they say, we've got Carson for the next 2 to 3 years, but we like this guy a lot, I wouldn't be shocked if they went quarterback.
You look at the starting quarterbacks in the NFL. I believe last year of the 32, 16 or 17 were former first-round picks. So chances are your franchise quarterback is going to be a guy you pick in the first round. If Marcus Mariota or Jameis Winston don't drop to 24, you're not reaching there. And the question is there somebody you absolutely love who you think might be around in the second or third round that is like Russell Wilson, who maybe is under the radar, but you think can be your franchise guy? They don't come around very often. The two guys that were in the Super Bowl last year are the exception, Brady and Russell Wilson. The norm is the guy that gets picked in the first round. So I think because last year, even though Logan Thomas was a rookie, he didn't show much at the end of the year when he had his chance. I think there's some disappointment there, but they also know they have a project. So the question is, are you ready to give up on that just yet? Because I think if you draft a quarterback this year, I think you're basically saying that about Logan Thomas.
And I would agree with that 100%. And I also agree that, if you fall in love with a quarterback, it's usually a guy that's going to be drafted long before 24. And that's the issue you face. And that's why I don't see them taking a quarterback unless it's much later. And like you said, then you're basically saying we're moving on from Logan Thomas. And I don't get the sense, at least at this point, that they're ready to do that yet because they want to see how this plays out a little bit longer. Well, that was a good talk. We'll have another edition now going forward of who some of the names are out in the draft. But for this edition of Cardinals Underground, Dave Pasch, Kyle Odegard, I'm Darren Urban. Thanks for joining us.